Okay, it appears numbers are more or less stabilized. So we can start, and I will, as more people join, they can join us along our journey today. Um, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Phil James. I'm the co-director of the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, and I'm leading all the work on the development of the social data and integrating social data into ocean accounts on behalf of the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership and all the partners. I also have the great pleasure of chairing this webinar today. It marks a real turning point, I think, for us, where we have been talking about integrating social data into ocean accounts and environmental economic accounting for a long time. And this is now really saying, how can we do it? And hopefully we will give you some um, um, insights into how we can start doing that. And actually, there is a lot of data already available. We don't need to collect a lot of new primary data necessarily. Just a few housekeeping points to start with. Um, First of all, you will get a survey pop-up at the end of this webinar. Please, if you could fill it out, it really, really helps us improve the webinars and also target new webinars. If you want to use the chat for questions, feel free to use the chat. We'll monitor it as best as possible, but there will also be opportunities to ask questions at a couple of points throughout the webinar. You will get a email tomorrow with a number of links to the report that we're launching today, and also to the audit guide itself. So don't worry too much that may not get may not be quick enough to get the QR codes today. They will arrive in an email tomorrow. You'll also get the recording of this webinar in that email and access to that. Therefore, note, this webinar is being recorded and it will be shared broadly. And finally, and very much not least, thank you very much to UK International Development through the Blue Planet Fund specifically for funding this really exploratory work. So if we, next slide, please. We go into the aims of today and what we will be talking about. We will be launching the new technical report and the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership, the GoApp Social Data Audit tool, exploring what it is, how it's being applied across different countries, and the insights it's generating. I'll talk initially about a little bit about ocean accounts for those who don't know what ocean accounts are, and I will just describe some of the latest movements on the social accounting approaches. And most excitingly, because you really don't need to hear from me for an hour, is we have a fantastic panel. So we can hear firsthand updates and experiences from the wonderful panel from around the world. On our agenda, I've just talked through the agenda. I actually don't need to talk through this again. I just realized. So I'll skip straight through to what are ocean accounts. Ocean accounts are integrated records of regularly compiled and crucially comparable data. They work across three domains: the environmental domain, the economic domain, and the social domain. So they work across all of the capitals that actually make us as a society function. The most crucial part of the Ocean Accounts, or for me anyway, where I find the greatest insights, are those arrows rather than necessarily just those circles. The linkages between the environment and the economic systems, the linkages between the environmental and the social systems, and obviously the social and the economic systems. Through understanding those linkages, understanding the flows between those systems, we can design more equitable and more sustainable policies, and support conservation and ocean health. And that's where ocean accounts really starts to give us really powerful insights. It isn't designed to deal with one policy area. It's designed to deal with a multitude of policy areas. So you don't just have to do an analysis of one policy area. And that's really important because it starts treating the system in which we live as a system rather than individual policy areas. Next slide, please. The important thing about Ocean Accounts is that it is based on a set of UN agreed statistical standards. And these are the System of National Accounts, and this was updated in 2025, which dictates our economic accounts. So that's how we calculate things like GDP, employment, etc. Then we have two System of Environmental Economic Accounting guidance documents, one of which is the Central Framework and one of which is the Ecosystem Accounting Framework. Doesn't necessarily matter particularly the difference, but the Ocean Accounts guidance takes these three documents and essentially applies it to the ocean. These documents, the reason why GOAP was established was the recognition that these documents don't really treat the unique natures of the ocean within them properly. And that's even within the updates themselves. So GOAP really does try and provide the guidance and the support to apply these documents to the ocean and to adjust the statistical standards in order to meet the demands. So how are Ocean Accounts different from other frameworks? Well, first of all, there's a strong statistical basis. It's based on UN standards. Second, they are more granularized. So we deliberately take granular data and localized data to make it as fine scale as possible. And so we make it as localized as possible. So we really start being able to understand the implications of different changes in the environment or our social systems for our system as a whole. They're also specific. So they use that locally relevant data. They generally try and avoid using generic data sets, such as for example, location-specific ecosystem service values rather than a global ecosystem service value, which may or may not reflect the services that particular ecosystem is providing. They also allow us to track over time. So they're not designed to be a one-off exercise. They are designed to be an accounts. And accounting by its very nature is generally a looking back, but is a ongoing exercise. You start picking up trends, you start picking up differences, you start picking up disasters, etc., within your accounts, and start understanding where your accounts change as a result of those disasters. And lastly, they really look at our dependency on nature. So we've been able to take our economic system, take it down to a very, very basic industrial classification codes, and start understanding how dependent our economy is on nature. So moving to social data and how that can be integrated into ocean accounts, it's key to making our system sustainable, because it brings an equitable dimension to our considerations. The Social Accounts Working Group defined this as the process of compiling, evaluating, and reporting data across inclusivity, equity, social, and cultural dimensions of the human-ocean relationship. The development of social accounts and social data within the accounting framework fundamentally changes how we understand and hopefully respond to our ocean challenges. It really puts people at the center of the discussion, and really understanding that relationship and that importance, that value that people place on the ocean itself. Next slide, please. So accounts make communities visible. It shines a light on ocean equity, inclusion, and justice. And frankly, because it brings people into the accounts, it increases the accuracy and legitimacy of the ocean accounts. It provides the social indicators for international and local decision making, but particularly looking at some of the SDGs, some of the GBF targets. And it potentially offers, and this is a very novel area, but it potentially offers a pathway to incorporating Indigenous, traditional, and local knowledge into macro decision-making frameworks. So just a little bit of a note on what's for GOAP-led collaborations on social accounts. Late 2024, we published a social accounts briefing paper, which was designed to give a summary of what the recent thinking was on accounts. This was then updated with a new publication, which really started delving into the social accounting arena and how to understand the social dimension. And the working group, a group of, I don't know actually how many authors, but you can see them there, a very, very long list of authors collaborated on an academic publication which talked about social accounts for the ocean, a path to inclusive and equitable ocean decision making. And I think that's a really, really critical, the title of that is really, really critical. So next slide, please. So what are we doing as GoApp most recently? So there are 4 social accounting pilots underway or just getting underway. These are in Belize, Costa Rica, Maldives, and Mozambique. They are country focused, country led pilots to understand what communities and decision makers want to include and feel is critical to include in their social accounting. They are modular in design, so they're tailored to national and regional or local needs. And obviously, as we said before, adding the social domain increases the legitimacy of the economic and environmental domains. So we're going to this is the process, the 1 to 7 step is the process, but we're going to specifically look at step 2, which is the data inventory. The pilots are doing the co-design, the data inventory that has been put together. We're going to explore the data inventory. And that is what we're launching today. Leveraging the national social data for ocean accounts, the technical report. And we'll hear from Rachel Thoms, who led the author team of that report shortly. This report details 8 country, the analysis of data from 8 countries of national surveys. So please take a read of the report. I'm sure Rachel will whet your appetite as we progress through. But there's also a number of accompanying documents to that report. There is a how-to guide. So if you want to do that analysis yourself, there's a how-to guide, do it. There's also a data audit template. So that's an Excel sheet that was the basis of this report. And if you want to get hold of it, please scan the QR code on the screen. You'll need to fill out a Google form and submit it, and you'll be given a passcode to the drive, to the Excel sheet on the Google Drive. So, what questions did we want to answer in the technical report? What were the objectives? So we wanted to say understand what social data relevant to ocean accounting already exists within the national statistics systems. So not trying to look at what data we want to collect or creating new primary data, but what exists currently. Can those existing data sets be disaggregated by the really critical social demographic characteristics? Are the existing data sets spatially connected to the marine environment? So can we actually use that data for the marine environment? Can we apply it to the marine environment, or are they too general? And to what extent can countries therefore begin to develop social accounts for the ocean? We looked across it's 15 different dimensions of social accounts. I think there's 14 here actually. It's actually 15. But we looked across the 15 different dimensions of social accounts as defined in the academic paper I mentioned before, and Rachel will take us through the information. So, Rachel, I'll hand over to you to take us through the findings of the report. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks as well to GoApp for their leadership and commitment to advancing social accounts. As Phil mentioned, I'm a researcher at WRI, and we see this work as extremely critical to building a sustainable ocean economy that really puts people at the forefront. So this work has been super exciting for me, and I'm looking forward to sharing our results. First, if you'll hit next, Bella. First, I want to take us through some of the countries that were included in the data inventory. As Phil mentioned, it was 8 countries. These include Mozambique, Belize, Vanuatu, Costa Rica, Fiji, Madagascar, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. And these countries were selected strategically because they are at different stages of their ocean accounting development. They provide diverse perspective on data availability and implementation challenges they might be facing. So if we'll go to the next slide. I'm going to walk us through the methodology that we used. There's 7 steps and we'll go through them. This is a high-level overview. Please check out the technical report or the how-to guide if you're interested in learning about how we did the data inventory in more detail. But as a first step, we identified relevant social data sources. We actually have a really good place to start here since most national statistics offices are mandated to collect and publish official statistics about their population and their economies. This data is usually collected through common instruments like the census, household income and expenditure surveys, and labor force surveys. So we identified these sources through a systematic web search of national statistic offices as well as ministerial websites. If we'll go to the next. After we had this preliminary list of data sources, we used an AI-assisted web query to validate the list for each country and ensure that no major sources or providers were missed. All right, we can go next. Yep, in steps 3 through 5, we logged the identified sources into a centralized database. So we also in these steps screened for the relevance of the data sources against those social data categories that Phil mentioned. And we retained the sources that were relevant to one or more of them. And then after we had identified those sources, compiled our list, kept the relevant ones, we reviewed all the available documentation. So that includes the reports, the questionnaires, the technical manuals, and we extracted detailed metadata at the source level. Then the last steps, which are 6 through 7, during this review, we logged all of the indicators within each source, which were relevant to one or more of the proposed social data categories. And we also collected detailed data at the indicator level. So through this process, we got a really good understanding of common statistical instruments that provide a lot of relevant social data for ocean accounts. I already mentioned a few, but in addition to these first 3, instruments around tourism, fisheries, and rural and informal economies, they contained really highly relevant information for social accounts. And yeah, as we outlined in the methods, these sources formed the basis for this source level data frame within our database. And I do want to give you guys an idea of what it looks like if we go to the next slide. This is just to show you the structure of the database at the source level. I'm not asking folks to read all this information, but just want to make the point that we collected extensive amount of information about each source. And then if you'll hit next, we also collected detailed information at the indicator level, which was linked to the corresponding source. So this allowed us to analyze indicators according to their own characteristics and characteristics of the source from which they come, like the sample design. So if we can head to the next slide. This was really powerful for answering our questions that we had. We're going to walk through each of the 4 questions that Phil outlined and talk through some of the results. So the first question is about what social data relevant to ocean accounts already exists. So across the 8 countries, we identified 880 indicators, which spanned all of the 17 social data categories. However, you'll see from the chart here, which shows the number of indicators by social data category, you can see that the amount of information varies significantly by the type of social data. So that kind of brings us to the second half of this question, which is how comprehensive is the data across the different types of social data. So if we head to the next slide, we know that those absolute numbers of indicators tell us part of the story, but we also wanted to understand how comprehensive the coverage was. So we assessed 2 things: the breadth of information available across national data systems. So that asks, is this type of data widely measured, or is it only measured in a few countries? And then we also looked at the depth of information. So that is asking, when this social data type is measured, how much information is available? Is it 1 or 2 indicators, or is it more comprehensive? And so we combine these into these two kind of evaluations into a composite indicator of availability, which is what we're seeing here on the screen. So we found 4 different social data types that had a high availability of information. This means there was substantial detail across all the countries. And we wanted to show a few examples because it helps you kind of visualize what we're talking about here. We don't have time to talk about each data category, but just to pull out one from jobs, income, and ocean-based welfare. This one is the share of annual household income from fisheries, whether that's from cash sale or home production. If we go to the next. So we also found that there were 6 data types with moderate availability. So these data types were more diverse in the first group, which are pretty socioeconomic. The second category, or the second kind of grouping of data types, were more like universal well-being measures, like human health, knowledge and education, gender equity. These were consistently measured across most countries, but with significant variation in the depth of information. And some great examples from this category, for example, in food and nutrition security, we have fish and shellfish contribution to protein and micronutrient consumption. And in the gender equity category, we have the share of female fishery operators participating in co-management organizations. And so just moving us along to this last group, there were a total of 7 data types that had a low availability of information. These consisted of sociocultural rather than socioeconomic data types. So these are things like access to marine rights and resources, or access and rights to marine resources, participation in governance, social cohesion, cultural connections, and these we found were unevenly measured across countries, often with minimal depth. So despite these gaps, there are some promising examples which we can look to. I'll highlight this one in the indigenous and local knowledge category, which is the proportion of the population with traditional fishing skills, such as the ability to build, paddle, or fish with a canoe, or the ability to use handmade fishing spear. So many more indicators I wish I could highlight, but we don't have time. So please do check out the report. There are a whole table of examples in there. And yeah, so this brings us to our second question, which is, can existing data sets be disaggregated by sociodemographic characteristics? Here we're seeing a chart with the share of indicators with an available disaggregation. That is the part in yellow. And there's a chart for each type of disaggregation variable. So we find that there's a good portion of existing data that publishes basic demographic disaggregation. For example, these are things like urban and rural households, sex, age. These are commonly available disaggregations. And I want to caveat that we looked at only what's published in reports. There's probably in the microdata higher share in reality of some of these more commonly collected variables. But I also want to highlight that there are key disaggregations which are relevant to coastal populations, especially those within them who may be experiencing vulnerability or marginalization that are rarely available. These include things like ethnicity, indigenous status, disability, which households live in low-lying or remote coastal areas, or involved in fishing, or food insecure. So despite these important basic disaggregations, we see a gap that leaves many ocean-dependent groups invisible in official statistics. And so the third question, sorry, we're just moving through these, but the third question asks if existing data is connected to marine environments and ocean-based activities. So before we get into the chart that I'll get into next, I just want to talk a little bit about what being connected to marine environments and ocean-based activities means, because there's a couple ways data could be connected. The first is that it's directly relevant to ocean activities and environments. This could be, for example, the proportion of households engaged in coral reef fishing. The second way is it's a general population indicator like employment or poverty, health, food security, which we can analyze and compare across coastal and inland populations. But this requires the data be associated with location information, so we can distinguish between coastal and inland areas, and it be derived from sources where coastal populations are likely included in the sampling frame in sufficient numbers for meaningful analysis. So if we can go to next, we'll have a chart here where we are looking at the share of indicators that meet this criteria for being connected to marine environments and ocean-based activities. Those are those blue bars. The gray are more general indicators that might not be suitable for integration into ocean accounting frameworks. So what we can see is when we're looking at this across the different social data categories, we can see that there's a sizable portion of the identified indicators that meet this criteria, but it varies a lot, again, by social data category. So most of those socioeconomic and kind of standard well-being social data categories show higher shares of data connected to coastal populations and activities. While for the social cultural categories, they're there at the bottom, we already identified those as having less information available, and we find that what is available is often less suitable for supporting ocean accounting frameworks. And that, in sum, kind of brings us to the last question, which asks, really, are countries in a place to start developing social accounts immediately, or do they need to start collecting additional primary data? And the answer to this question is that countries can begin developing social accounts. We found that there's a strong foundation of social data within national statistics systems. And existing data sets allow for basic disaggregation across things like sex, age, and urban and rural areas. Plus, a large portion of the social data are spatially and thematically connected to marine environments so they can support ocean accounting. But I also want to highlight, as we discussed, there are important gaps in the coverage of sociocultural and governance categories, the visibility of vulnerable and marginalized coastal users, and the ability to connect data to coastal populations and ocean-based activities. There are, however, targeted improvements that can enhance national data systems, demonstrating a more practical pathway towards comprehensive and robust social accounts in the future. So I want to take the time to run through a few of these. Due to time, we can't go through all of them. I'll highlight one kind of from each area of improvement. And if you want to read more, please do check out the technical report. So the first area is the relevance to marine and coastal conditions and activities. So one thing I will highlight here that countries can do is use more granular classification codes. So countries are often using international classification codes for things like jobs, expenditure, and consumption. These classification systems are hierarchical, and they often become more relevant to ocean and marine ecosystems at more granular levels. So as an example, often a sectoral level classification for jobs at a higher level might be fisheries and aquaculture. However, training enumerators to distinguish between jobs at more detailed classification levels, like between marine fishing and freshwater fishing, could add immense detail for our ocean accounts. And if we can go to the next area, we'll talk about resolution and geographic detail. Something that countries can do here that I'll highlight is to integrate data from multiple sources and use something called small area estimation. This involves identifying common variables between the census, which has full population coverage, and household surveys, such as the Household Income and Expenditure Survey, which often are more limited in their geographic specificity. So these variables, which can be identified that are shared across both of these two instruments, things like household size, education, housing type, gender of the household head, can be used in a statistical model to predict detailed outcomes, for example, marine livelihood participation in census areas based on the patterns that are observed in the household survey data. And we'll move on to the third area, which is the representation of coastal populations in survey designs. Something that is really important that national data systems can do is create a specific coastal inland stratification within the survey design. So this would involve defining a coastal zone, let's say households within 5 kilometers of the coastline, then creating a separate sampling frame for coastal and inland populations and allocating sample sizes to ensure adequate representation of the coastal subpopulation. Finally, we'll move on to the last area, which is really two, which is disaggregation and coverage of sociocultural indicators. Here, a really easy thing that countries can do is expand the disaggregation variables. So this would involve just adding questions on things like indigenous status, disability, migration status, and other key identities. Maybe even household level variables like the proximity to the coastline, involvement in fishing, food security status. Something that's a little more challenging and will require more work is creating context-specific sociocultural indicators. Some might be straightforward, like customary access rights and participation in local marine management. Others should really be co-designed with coastal communities, so they reflect things like their cultural connections to the ocean or traditional knowledge of ocean ecosystems or ocean-based skills and practices. All right, so with all that, if you don't remember anything that I said today, because there was a lot of information, there are a couple key takeaways I want you to leave with. The first, which we already discussed, is that countries can begin developing social accounts immediately using the existing data. There are several social data categories like jobs, welfare, livelihoods, and vulnerability that have sufficient information for pilot implementation. And at the same time, there are also targeted improvements in national data systems, which can enhance their relevance, their resolution, their representation, and their inclusivity. And this offers a practical pathway towards more comprehensive social accounts at the national level. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for listening, and I'll pass it back to Phil.
Thanks, Rachel. I think that's a really good spin through of what is an incredibly detailed technical report and reflects a huge amount of work that Rachel and others have put into this area. So thank you very much. If you do want to read the technical report, a reminder of the QR code is there, and the social data audit tool, which Rachel's described as the basis of all of these results, is also on the screen again. First of all, I just want to ask if there are any questions from the audience before we turn to our rather exciting panel. And apologies if the sound is a little bit off. I've had a message to say the sound might be a little bit off. So if you're suffering from that, I do apologize. I've not seen any questions, which therefore there's no answers. So we will turn to our fantastic panel. And thank you to all of the panel members for joining us. we've got a wonderful panel from Belize, Mozambique, Ghana, and Kenya. To start us, we have Yete, who is a senior statistician at the Statistical Institute of Belize, with over 17 years of experience in official statistics and macroeconomic indicators and data innovation. He serves as the lead fellow for Belize in compiling the ocean accounts, including ocean economy satellite accounts, and implementing the system of environmental economic accounting for the ocean. He aims to use this exercise to strengthen the evidence for marine spatial planning, climate resilience, and coastal resource management. As a co-design partner for the Belize Pilot Social Account and recipient of the GOAP country-led report for Belize, he has identified available secondary data and critical gaps for future collection efforts. His work is at the intersection of environment and social accounting and contributes to regional knowledge exchange and advances holistic, data-driven approaches to sustainable development in Belize. Thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. Nilton Chakui is an economist at the National Institute of Statistics in Mozambique, with more than 10 years experience working in national accounts and prices. His duties and responsibilities include compilation of regional accounts and human development indicators at national and regional levels, energy flow accounts, as in the SEEA energy account, and developing macro level studies on poverty and well-being. He's currently leader of the technical coordination group for the Mozambique Blue Economy satellite accounts. He's also part of the National Social Account Mozambique pilot and has been working on the Eham Bay social account with a particular focus on the use of secondary data. Holds a degree in economics, just like myself, Nilton, and a master's degree in agricultural economics, specializing in agricultural markets, both from Eduardo Mondlane University of Mozambique in Maputo. Agia joins us from University of Cape Coast, Ghana, with over 7 years of experience in post-harvest fishery sector. She's worked to enhance the value addition of market access for women fish processors, an often overlooked but vital group in the fisheries value chain. She has contributed to the development of natural capital accounts in collaboration with government institutions, helping integrate environmental data into policy decisions as part of her work with the Ocean Accounts framework. She has been trialing social data audit tool in Ghana to identify and integrate social data into national ocean accounting processes. She is currently pursuing a doctorate in circular economy and agricultural waste, focusing on transforming waste streams into valuable resources for communities. Passionate about sustainability, she actively engages in knowledge sharing and capacity building. Her inclusive, solution-oriented approach makes her a strong advocate for environmental sustainability and social equity. Dr. Juliet from ChemFree is a marine scientist and ocean accounts fellow with over 15 years of experience studying and protecting and restoring coral reefs. She works, as I mentioned, at the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute, ChemFree, playing a catalytic role in bringing together science and community action to safeguard the ocean, while strengthening the resilience of people who depend upon it for their livelihoods. So please join me and welcome the panel to the, I guess, virtual stage. We'll start off with Jesse from Belize. I wonder if you could share why integrating social data into ocean accounts has become important for your work in Belize. You've got a large portfolio there. Why is social data important in your portfolio?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Well, good morning from my side of the world. Good evening for your side of the world, maybe, or good night. My name is Efteo Chaeta, and as Dr. Phil has already presented, I work alongside the pilot project here in Belize, doing the ocean accounts for Belize as the first pilot project. The government of Belize has a strong initiative on understanding what's the contribution of the blue economy to the overall marine space and the total economy, and so we need to go beyond the information on the economy to understand what level of impact it does have on the population. and how that can help us to do better planning regarding our marine space, no? So that is why the moving beyond the ocean accounts traditional framework is important, because it trickles down to what we need to understand the social dimensions of why the ocean is important for our community. That's where I would say why we're interested in this pilot.
Phil, I think
Sorry, I just realised I was on mute. My apologies, everybody. I was saying thank you very much. I'll move to Kia. You're obviously using the social data audit tool to understand the available data in Ghana. So why integrating social data into the Ocean Accounts work for you? Why has that become important for you?
Okay, so hello everyone. So for our team in Ghana, we are working on the ecosystem service account, and we are working at the national level and also at the community level. At the community level, we are working in the Keita area, and whenever you go to the communities, one question which keeps coming up is, what is the essence? I mean, they ask, what is in it for us? How does it benefit us? So to help the communities relate better to the work that we are doing, to the mangrove ecosystems that they interact with on a daily basis, we thought we should use the social data becomes very important, because it helps us to identify it or to highlight the employment benefits, how the ecosystem relates to their daily lives, so that they can relate better to it. So for us, even though we are working on the ecosystem services account, we think we want to highlight the social data so that the communities can relate better to the work that we are doing. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. That's a really great example of where representation within these macro frameworks is really critical for localized decision making. So I appreciate that. Nilton, I'll come to you now. Nilton, I realize you're going to respond in Portuguese, and Rachel is going to aptly translate for those who don't speak Portuguese on the call. And I'm going to ask, first of all, could you share why integrating social data into Ocean Accounts is important in Mozambique?
Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Rachel, for the first part of this webinar. Your both presentation was very interesting and very explicit in terms of the content. Of course, I will answer the question in Portuguese, so I will gently have a help from Rachel. And my answer we goes in this way. Antes de mais, é preciso, para o caso de Moçambique, é preciso reconhecer que temos uma quantidade elevada de pessoas e agregados familiares que vivem, portanto, cercados do ecossistema marítimo, fluvial e lacustre. Rachel?
Right, so Nelson was saying before anything, we need to realize that there's a large portion of people and households in Mozambique that live near marine areas, marine ecosystems, also near rivers and the coastal area.
As primeiras estimativas que foram feitas, algumas até feitas pelo Instituto Nacional de Estatística e algumas organizações não governamentais, como o Biofund e WWF, apontam para a casa de 3/3 da população que vive, portanto, nesses ecossistemas.
So Nilton was saying, just as an estimate from INE and some other organizations like WWF and Biofund, they estimate that about a third of the Mozambican population lives in these areas.
Portanto, essas zonas que são vitais e sobretudo pela sua densidade populacional, são vitais pelo seu papel, não só na questão de prover bens e serviços e atividades econômicas, mas também tem questões relacionadas com a cultura, e questões sociais envolvidas. E, portanto, é essencial captar essa dimensão social no conjunto das contas econômicas e também relacionadas com a extensão e a qualidade dos ecossistemas marinhos.
All right, so Nelson was saying that these zones are really vital for their role in providing economic goods and services, but they also have this really important social and cultural value. And it's essential to capture this alongside those economic accounts and the environmental accounts of ecosystem extent and condition.
E, portanto, para terminar, queria dizer, e isto está alinhado com as primeiras duas apresentações, que é necessário reconhecer o valor social desses ecossistemas marinhos, para além da alimentação que eles trazem, também tem questões como emprego e questões culturais, que é sempre importante captar se quisermos tomar decisões baseadas em evidência, e, no fundo, quem é mais importante são as pessoas, e são elas as quais devemos estabelecer o principal foco.
All right, so Milton was saying, just to sum it up, like in relationship to the first two presentations, what we really need to realize is the importance of these ecosystems for things like food security and jobs and income, and decision makers need to have this information to make more informed decisions because people are really at the foundation here.
E eu vou parar por aqui, Phil, e obrigado pela pergunta.
He said he'll stop here, Phil, and thanks for the question.
Thank you, Nilton. Thank you, Rachel, as well. I'll move to Juliet, and same question, I guess, for you. You're starting to look at using the tool to assess the data availability in Kenya. And why do you think integrating social data into the accounts work that's happened in Kenya is important?
Okay, thank you, Phil, for that question. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So I think I'll start by saying that probably like most countries in the South, the coastal communities are highly dependent on the marine ecosystem, especially the nearshore ecosystem. So we found a lot of relationship between the people and the ecosystem. In Kenya right now, we have started developing, or we are almost towards the end of developing the National Marine Spatial Plan. And there's a lot of data that has been aggregated already for that purpose. So when we started piloting the ocean accounts in Kenya, which we are doing it at a local government level, the county level, we noticed that there's already a lot of data. But when it comes to integration of that data, it was a problem. So already we have a lot of ecosystem data. The country has been doing a lot of surveys along the coastal counties, and we have a lot of ecosystem data. We have the condition, the spatial, or rather the extent information. But when it comes to the social data, we realize that we have it, but putting it together into the framework of relating it to the other accounts data was a bit challenging. So this information is very important because right now we have things like the locally managed areas. We have the blue carbon activities going on. We have restoration activities going on. And how do we interpret this information in terms of the benefits it's having to the people, so that even as we're doing these efforts in conservation, we can account it to, we can hold the people accountable as well, not only benefiting, but also be accountable in terms of protecting these ecosystems. So the social accounts information becomes very critical in these processes in order to motivate for example, the government into protecting these ecosystems, but also to motivate the people to protect these ecosystems better, or to have that kind of stewardship to the ecosystem. So I think that's where we are at the very initial stages, where we are still diagnosing the data that we have, trying to see how we can harmonize it into the framework. But we hope that's going to be, the end goal is going to be in conservation, building the financial capacity of the people, and also maybe upscaling to a national account in future. But now it's like a really small spatial scale. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Appreciate that. I apologies. I got kicked out and then I rejoined, so I might have missed a little bit of that, but I really appreciate it. Can I just ask, what are the what do you think the insights from this? How do you think they might enable Kenya to adapt its marine protected area management approaches?
Yes, so from the perspective that we've had about marine protected areas in Kenya, all the time it's about protecting biodiversity, and because there are places where there's minimal human activities, it's always been about the biodiversity, the ecosystem integrity, restoring the ecosystem, and the bit about the social benefits to these kind of conservation strategies has been missing. The linkage has not come out clearly, and the social accounts, I think, is going to provide a very important avenue, or rather a bridge into connecting how conservation in MPAs and other forms of management can link directly to the benefits that the people are getting. And also the investment. We invest a lot in conservation, putting in money to protect areas, but what are the benefits for we are getting for putting in that kind of money into it? So yeah.
Very important that the decision makers are aware of those benefits without a shadow of a doubt. Thanks. I think I'll pick up. There's a couple of questions in the chat, and one of them I thought was quite interesting about how did the countries respond to the recommendations on the adaptation of some of their data collection. And apologies if we don't get to all the questions. Nilton, I thought I would turn to you on this for this question. What gaps did the social data show, and how is Mozambique thinking about these gaps, and how did you find the data? The findings from the data audit?
Nilton, would you like me to translate that, or did you get Phil's question? Nilton, I'm not sure if you're talking, but you're muted.
Okay, thanks, Phil, for this question. É o seguinte, os nossos sistemas, vou começar por responder a pergunta dizendo o seguinte, que os nossos sistemas de estatística, sobretudo na componente dos inquéritos, eles têm uma abordagem representativa que não é muito favorável, por exemplo, à questão de comunidades costeiras e outras relacionadas com a economia azul. E este é um grande desafio que nós temos no momento, sobretudo porque as estimativas que podem ser geradas, considerando os inquéritos que existem, podem ter um viés, justamente porque as amostras não têm essa representatividade ao nível de comunidades costeiras. Essa é uma das primeiras grandes dificuldades que nós temos ao nível do nosso sistema.
Okay, so Nilton was saying that he's talking about their statistical system in terms of their surveys. He's saying a big thing that came out is that the sample is not really favorable for coastal populations in the blue economy. This is really a challenge because they find there's probably a lot of bias because they didn't sample coastal areas for representation. Instead, it's at the provincial level. So this is a big challenge in creating accurate estimates for coastal areas.
E a segunda grande questão tem a ver com o emprego informal, né? Como a maior parte dos países africanos, e Moçambique não é exceção, há uma grande porção da população que se dedica a atividades informais e não tem nenhum registro E isso também dificulta, de alguma forma, captar algumas dimensões, sobretudo a dimensão do emprego na componente das indústrias marinhas e desse ecossistema. Rachel?
So Nilton is saying the other challenge, which is about informal employment, which like in many African countries in Mozambique, a large portion of the population is dedicated to informal economies. They're not registered. And this is really hard to capture, and especially this kind of informal employment that's associated with marine and ocean economies. It's been difficult to capture. And I will note, I'm adding on top of Nilton's things, but Mozambique actually does have a dedicated survey for the informal economy. And they're one of the few that we looked at that has that. So even with this dedicated survey instrument, they still have a lot of challenges in really capturing informal employment.
Agora, é preciso também dar uma nota positiva, porque nós temos algumas operações pelo reconhecimento dessa dimensão informal, como é o caso do inquérito de ajustamentos familiares, que tem uma perspectiva de captar diferentes nuances e vertentes do setor informal no país. Mas também gostava de deixar uma nota que em 2027 vamos conduzir o censo da população e se calhar também neste momento seria uma boa oportunidade de, no processo de advocacia e de consulta e de escutação para as questões do censo, poder-se introduzir já algumas variáveis que podem ajudar a captar a dimensão social, porque é uma operação que vai albergar toda a população e aí sim podemos ter esse atributo de representatividade das comunidades costeiras. Rachel?
Okay, so then Nilton said he was just reiterating, like on a positive note, they do have this informal sector survey that's working to kind of capture some of this nuance that's involved in informal sectors. And in 2027, Mozambique is having their next census. And Nilton is saying during this advocacy and like kind of like preparation phase, he thinks it would be really great to introduce a couple variables, maybe one variable that's able to capture some of these social dimensions of ocean-based activities and ocean economies and coastal populations. So he sees this as a really big opportunity to have a statistic that has full population coverage and is really strong and can start to speak to some of these harder to capture variables.
E acho que ia parar por aqui, Phil, e obrigado também por essa pergunta.
He said, I'll stop here, and thanks, Phil, for the question.
Thank you, Nilton. Thank you, Rachel. Deeply appreciated. I think I've probably got time for one more of the panelists, and I'll ask Belize, because you've already had this data tool collected, or these data collected, and I'm just interested what the perhaps surprising or maybe most significant findings were from the Belize data audit.
Yes, and thank you again. First of all, I would like to mention that from the information that I see, which is mainly highlighting on the products of the Statistical Institute of Belize, which is great, it's good because it highlights the social statistics that we produce, but I think that they did not take advantage of the level and depth of administrative data that we possess in Belize. And so I think that would be my recommendation, to go a bit more on the administrative data, because, for instance, to be a fisherman in Belize, you have to register. And thus there's demographic information already captured by the fisheries department on where these people are coming from, and also what type of assets they have, because they have to register their boats and stuff like that. No. Additionally, they would report the volume of fishing that they are doing, and by area, by the protected areas and stuff like that. No. The other thing that I think it's failing to do right now is looking at the vast amount of information that exists in Belize from the NGO sectors, because the NGO sectors are heavily involved in the marine space, in protecting the marine space in Belize. So I think a stronger collaboration would be needed there to obtain information that already exists. For instance, there was I think the second time I've read it, an ocean use survey. So highlights where different communities and different people are using the ocean and how they're using it. So I think that requires a little bit more information for us to look at and see how we can integrate all the required social dimensions into the analysis that will be of importance to this. Just to highlight that with GoUp, we are working with the Natural Accounting Project, also from Stanford, and we are converging everything into one project because that will provide us more information to provide the social valuation and the economic valuation of the marine space to our society. That's my main points that I wanted to highlight. Thank you again.
No, appreciate it. I think that's the data audit tool was specifically focused on official national statistical survey sources. But I think there's a really interesting point you make at the end there about other sources. Well, take advantage of the administrative sources, take advantage of the NGO sectors. It's very interesting. I had a conversation with another Latin American country 2 days ago, actually, and we were talking about how to integrate these various different types of data sources, and particularly because they have far less strict validation processes. For example, the NGOs are far less strict. A lot of the administrative data is self-reported. So it's a really interesting sort of complications around different data sources, and it's more of a challenge than perhaps I think some people might appreciate. But I really appreciate it. Thank you very much to all the panel. I really appreciate your insights. Apologies I couldn't get through all of the questions, but I thought it was quite important to finish roughly on time. So thank you very much for all the speakers, and of course to Rachel for both doing the translation but also for presenting the work. My apologies for not getting to all the questions in the chat as well. If you want the technical report and the inventory, please do use these QR codes. As I said at the start, the recording of this webinar and the links will be shared tomorrow through email with you all. If you want to engage with social accounts and how we're all progressing, please do join the social accounts working group. You can sign up at that QR code on the screen, or you can contact my colleague, Dr. Rebecca Shellock, who is the social scientist who's responsible for the social accounts area within the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership. Yeah, please do join the working group. Your insights will be really critical. So all that's left to do is thank you again to the panel. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Rachel and WRI, for supporting us on this. It's really great piece of work, and I hope lots and lots of people enjoy the technical report. Please do drop me a line as well. My email's on the screen now. Very happy to talk more on social data. It's where I spent quite a lot of my career, and I really do enjoy it. And a final thank you to the UK Blue Planet Fund, International Development Funding, for supporting this work. And may I wish you all a great day, evening, or night. Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye-bye.